Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the Scared to Dance podcast with me, your host, Paul Richards. Over the course of this series, I've been talking to some of my favourite people about their musical passions past and present. These include people who have DJ'd at our club night, as well as those who have created our film nights. Today, I'm joined by Gwenno, a musician whose work feels both timeless and boldly futuristic. Born into a family steeped in language, culture and creativity, Gwenno has carved out a singular place in contemporary music. Whether singing in Welsh or Cornish, her work transforms endangered languages into living soundscapes. Across her 4 studio albums, she has blended folklore with synths, tradition with experimentation, and personal storytelling with sharp cultural insight. Hi Gwenno, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
I saw you play on your recent UK and Ireland tour at Earth. How was the tour for you? Do you still enjoy going up and down the country?
I think I love it more. And I think the older I get, the more I realise that that's life. And I haven't been able to tour as much because I've had children, but they're getting a bit older now. So I'm able to do it a bit easier because they're sort of easier to look after when we're not there. I just love it. And I think especially because we're living so digitally, it just means it's just being in the room with people. I was saying it every night because it was just, and also that's where you learn, like you kind of learn what you're doing. Like you can't measure that really. I mean, like recording music is a very different thing, but I think just being in the room with other people is, it's a vibe, isn't it?
So do you think that greater appreciation is just getting older and sort of appreciating those moments when they come, whereas when you're younger, you're maybe a little bit more on a treadmill, perhaps?
It's not so much that you're on a treadmill. I just think when you're younger, you can't take anything in. Like some people do, maybe. I've never met many. I haven't met many, but I just think you can't really take it in because it's all happening and life. Yeah, just being that little bit older gives you a greater appreciation. Like, I agree. Like with that happening and those moments happening and being able to tour at all and like we TM and everything ourselves. So I think like that's been good. I think that's been so much like the journey of me making solo records has been about operating slightly outside of the music industry in a way. I mean, we are on Heavenly and obviously I'm engaged with the music industry, but not necessarily as much at its mercy. And I think that is a luxury to have as a sort of slightly more seasoned artist, is that you've sort of created your own path and you're sort of just on the road and your sort of expectations are more about the existence and getting on with it really. And being able to do it forever, really. I mean, I just don't want to stop doing it. So it's just working out how to do that outside of other people being able to control that. But I actually think that the music industry, for what it's worth, is that at the moment anyway, because it's all sort of changing so much.
Yeah, I mean, just through doing this podcast, speaking to several musicians from people in their 20s to their 50s and everything in between, that does seem to be a general consensus. Everyone sort of says, oh, well, I'm in the music industry, but sort of not really in the music industry, which then sort of begs the question, well, what is the music industry?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's really fractured, and I think that it's bare bones in many ways, particularly on the sort of level that I'm working at. And I think that, I mean, they keep saying, oh, artists have power, and I think that perhaps if you are creating your own world and you're pursuing it in that sense, maybe there's a little bit more autonomy, but yeah, I don't know. It's a journey because I think that's the thing is so I've found it so crucial really to have that engagement with what people would deem to be the music industry, because you do learn a huge amount, and I think it's just about surviving it, to be honest. It really is. I mean, that's what it is. It's like you either survive it or you don't. I mean that psychologically as well as, physically and economically as well.
Do you think artists have power?
I think to be honest, I think it changes with each generation, because what I found was when I came into the music industry at the early noughties, and I came from Wales as well, so I was immediately immersed in a very DIY scene. I saw, people putting out their own records, booking their own tours and all of that stuff. And then joining the Pipettes, which was an indie band, which was a pretty DIY band initially. I think that I have that experience as a generation. I think kind of that's when the shit hit the fan and there was just no money around for bands like ours or, my sort of experience. I think the generation before did have a sort of slightly better time from Wales. I think those bands had bigger deals, they had money being thrown around a lot and some were cleverer than others in knowing how to take advantage of it. But I think that I'm definitely from the generation where there wasn't any money around. So I don't know what that means. Do you know what I mean? I don't know what that means to be like flown across the world or, none of that. I've just never had that experience. And so it's always really been sort of back against the walls. But I think that that's contributed to me having a sort of more of a marathon outlook on it as well. Because it's not a like fireworks display and then you're going, oh my God, what happened? I don't know what I'm supposed to do next. You just don't think like that because you've sort of always done it yourself.
Yeah.
So I think with that in mind, and I think I presume that that's even more so like that now. So I do think artists have, and it depends what you want to do. Do you know what I mean? Like if you want free, like artistic freedom and you want to just keep a roof over your head, then it's just a lot of working, a lot of doing a lot of things yourself and just getting on with it and trying to manage it and thinking about it long term. And like, if you want to be an artist forever, then that's how it is and you get on with it,
Speaking of those generational differences, and going back to the Pipettes, at the gig at Earth, you were joined by Rose Eleanor Doug on stage. How was that for you?
Oh, it was amazing. Do you know what? Because we haven't sang together for 17 years. It was really emotional because Rose came, and we were really good friends, and Rose came to the sound check to run through the song. And because when we when we recorded, Rose came to Cardiff and she just recorded her vocals over what was already there. So it was really emotional because that was what we were all about, really, was live shows, and we did a lot of touring, and that's.
Well, I saw you play a few times.
Yeah, we were constantly touring, and it was it was as chaotic and frustrating as it was fantastic and ridiculous. So it was really emotional. The gig was fab. It was just really nice. And I felt it was lovely because so much of this record has been about just embracing all my sort of times, really, as a sort of from being a young adult onwards, and sort of some kind of reconciliation with all of that stuff, being the age that I am. It was just sort of wanting to pause and go, oh yeah, all of that was, there was good in there as well. And you don't have to just keep running away from yourself. And it was just nice to be able to welcome Rose into that and acknowledge also, it's a song about Brighton, and just being able to go, yeah, I can embrace that, and not so much with Rose, but with the song. And I wanted Rose beside me for it, because as immediately when I wrote that song, and I started thinking about vocals and, expanding on it. And I was like, it just felt like Rose should be there, and it was just that kind of song that, it was a song about Brighton. So, and it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but also quite serious. So it just felt, like the right thing to do. So it's just glorious, really. And that venue, Earth, that is just like the best venue ever. It's just everything. Because it reminded me of Wilton's, and I've never done a show there. I've only been there for a drink or whatever. What a venue.
How do you look back on the Pipettes? I understand that working with the producer Martin Rushent had a big impact on your solo work.
Not so much on mine. I think it definitely had on my sister's.
Okay.
Less so on mine, I think, as much as, Martin Rushent's an absolute legendary producer. That second album was a really difficult spot for me. It was really, really hard because on the surface, it looked like there was 3 girls in the band. There were 4, there was 4 boys as well, 7 of us. Joe had left the band to create the Jing Jang Jong. Then Rose left, and then Becky went, and then Bobby was like, you should stay, come on. And I was like, yeah, all right. And being the passive person that I can be, I went, yeah, okay. And then my sister came in and she was really enthusiastic and I wasn't, because I was like, I've finished here, and there was a sense of duty there, really. I felt like I was on the Titanic, and I was just like, do you know what? And also it was kind of really sort of that, not particularly public humiliation, but more public than it is a public facing thing to a certain degree in a tiny, tiny corner of the internet. But it was a really, really challenging time. And yeah, I just did feel like that, you know, that quartet that plays on the Titanic and you're just sinking. And I was just like, do you know what? I've committed to this now, so I've just got to do it. But it's like, it was a lesson in not being passive, which I can tend to be, because I'm really open person that kind of goes, well, you know, I was quite passive in joining the Pipettes. You know, it's like, oh, this band's, and I went to see the Pipettes. I was like, oh, this is great, and like, I love dancing, and you know, the 60s. This is fabulous, and everyone's a bit cheeky. I kind of want to laugh, you know. So, like, passivity works really well sometimes. And sometimes I think you've got to make decisions, and I can't regret anything because I committed to it and I own it. But I didn't have a good time at all. It's like probably the worst period of my creative life. and mainly because it was something I committed to and I couldn't reject, really. And I just thought, I fucking made my bed here, so I've just got to fucking just own it and sink publicly and get all those horrendous reviews and know that I partly agree with it, but also that I've this sense of loyalty, and which doesn't help anyone. You know, it doesn't help anyone if you're sticking around as something you don't want to do and everyone else wants to do. But that, you know, it was just shit luck, really, and a lesson learned.
Do you think that impacted your solo career and how you wanted to shape that?
Oh God, yeah, because it was kind of, I was like, this is so far removed. I have no like grip on this creatively. I'm just passive and just, you know, and it's my fault. I don't blame anybody else for it. It was definitely my fault. You know, you are pressured. It's like being in a marriage, being in a band, I think, because there is a sense of responsibility to that relationship that you kind of have to see through. But so that was towards the late noughties then, and I was just like, I've got to start again, because I kind of got to go back to square one here and just work out where I'm coming from. And also I think, you know, just to make it broader and a bit abstract, I'm Welsh, but I also have parents who were born in England. My mum's from London, so there was always that. I've always had that tension, really, between having family roots across the UK, but also being born into a very Welsh situation. So I've always, and so when I saw the Pipettes, that was kind of, you know, joining the Pipettes was partly a rebellion as well, because I was just like, well, I understand the southeast of England because I actually have family there. So, like, what is this all about? And then I didn't factor class into it because the Pipettes is a very middle-class band. And I was like, oh, shit, actually. It's slightly different to what I know, even that, well, on my mum's side at least, not on my dad's side at all. But it was, and so it's always been about that tension. And I think that what I wanted to do was, and I think when you come from a minoritized culture, you really can't escape it. And I think actually you can't escape any of your childhood, in my opinion. I've used it so much in my work as a sort of form of therapy, really, to try and work out and acknowledge it. But going back to the language again, to talk, you know, to bring it back to how you sort of not protect yourself, but you have this barrier against perhaps the commercial music industry or whatever. Going back to the Welsh language and Cornish was my way of going, right, well, this doesn't exist within that frame, but it does exist within my creativity. So it was a really, really good route to go back to start again. And I felt very empowered and protected. And I literally felt about 3 years old. So it's kind of, that's where I went back to, you know, just like back to that inner child that has the sort of imagination and the innocence and naivety, and that isn't scared of anything. This kind of just creating your own world. There's a really, really useful, and so I'm really grateful for it. So, all that tension that you have between like, I could have been born anywhere, or what is my identity or anything like that. I think there was a real usefulness to it. And I've been really empowered by it. And that's been my whole journey for the past 10 years, is kind of how empowering and how creative using the languages that I grew up with has been, and just sort of giving me just this intuitive feeling of who I am.
So your latest album, Utopia, is predominantly recorded in English, which is quite a shift for you, as in the past you've mostly written in Welsh and Cornish. What made you decide to do that on your fourth album?
I think, again, it was because everything for me, like all my records, are so autobiographical, and they're quite abstract, but they are. And I had, I've had a life in the English language, through the English language, that's been really emotional, really personal, really varied. It's kind of, as soon as I left home at 16, my life was English. And that was a long time ago. And so it was just about, I felt, because what I felt up until that point was that it was really important to me, within my outlook, that the languages that I had that were lesser spoken languages had the same status as the English language. And that's quite a hard thing to do psychologically, because you use English so much and there's so much English culture. And the UK is, it's a monoglot state, even though Wales is a bilingual country. So I've sort of wanted to bring those languages up. It's like a sort of almost like a graph. Like, do you know, like when you in Tesco's you put those like fake pennies in, and it's a bit like that, where you kind of go, right, I've got to get the coin up to that level so that it's all on the same level. Yeah. And then because that's the reality for me. And then it got to the point that I got to when I was pregnant with my daughter, that I was like, I haven't written a song in English for 10 years. What is that now? And it was really nice because I could come back to it with a really fresh approach, not thinking too much about who am I trying to be here? It just came from me, and actually being able to write in that way quite intuitively had come from my experience in writing in Welsh and Cornish for 10 years. And it's so I almost feel like my English writing is now influenced by my Welsh and Cornish rather than it being the dominant thing. And I just had all these experiences, and I am really interested in language and time, and I need to research more into it. But certainly this year has been a big, massive time slip for me. In that I don't really understand what time is. I wouldn't be able to tell you what time is, because I don't think it's linear. And that's quite Celtic thinking in terms of it being cyclical. But I couldn't tell you. If you asked me what time is, I wouldn't be able to define it, because especially through my work, I tend to jump centuries. And also so much of my work has artists in it that are not what we call alive, but they are. So I don't even understand death either. I don't understand death, and I don't understand time, which I love, because I think that's what's fantastic about creating records, is that you create another reality, and you do. And I'm a little bit of a method actor with it as well, because I live my records. I don't I sort of create these worlds, and then I'm in them, and it's it's a living thing. But I'm sure most artists feel that way.
Well, on that point of sort of living in different worlds, Utopia followed your third album, Tresor, which was nominated for the Mercury Prize. Did you have any hesitation at all about singing in English? Did you worry at all that those people that buy your records and go to your gigs might think well, hang on a minute, she's singing in English now?
Yeah, but I think for me, I'm trilingual. Yeah. I have a real affection for the English language. I have a real affection for English people. I'm a massive bridge builder. That's my vibe, It's finding the commonality between us. And I'm particularly interested in that within the UK because how interchangeable Great Britain is and has been always. So much of my work has been to do with that. So much of my work in Welsh and Cornish has been about wanting to share stories about those cultures because I think they're relevant to all culture that is on this island and beyond. You know, it's like trying to have a conversation. And I think also I'm always reacting to the last thing I've done. And I'm also, I don't want to play it safe. And I thought, what's the worst thing I could do? Sing in English, probably. So I should do that. Like, it is an anarchist in me that doesn't want to play it safe and do the thing that anyone would assume that I would do. And I don't do it just to be pedantic. I do it out of curiosity. So I'm like, I was just kind of like, how would that work? And it's also that thing of like, as an artist, you can't be thinking about what other people would want you to do. I mean, it's just not conceivable. Like, you just can't, it's just not practical to think like that because you can't be in other people's heads. But it's that sort of your own journey and curiosity, and on a really deeply personal level, it was something that I wanted to explore in my work and just pull it into the fold. And what's been fab is doing these shows has been able, because it was almost like the elephant in the room, it was like, oh, now I'm just a Welsh and Cornish artist. And I was like, yeah, but I'm not, am I? I was in an indie pop band that was the most English band I could find. Like, I've got it's like, I'm all of those things, and we all are. And it's actually, as you get older, I think you should embrace all of the stuff that you are. And especially, culture's my interest and language and all of that stuff. And so I'm not going to just cut that off. Because maybe I find a good song there. Like, why do that? And also I think it adds to your skill set as a writer if you can use all the languages. I was interested in going back to that language again and going, okay, well, I've learned how to sort of put sentences together, like some sort of couplets together or whatever. Like, can I do that in that third language that I was always a little bit, wanting to push aside? Like, come on then. Like, it's sort of, there's nothing scary or particularly, brave about it. But I think just in your own journey, I think you can't, don't dismiss anything. Just use all the tools in your box because that's what you've got and that's who you are. And actually for me, I feel pulling Utopia into the whole body of work that I have. I feel like I'm being a bit more open and clearer and more whole about what I am. And that's me,
On Utopia, how did you decide which songs would be in Welsh, Cornish and English? Was it sort of different parts of your life that you're looking back on? And so that's how they were sort of categorised?
Yeah, well, the tool that I used with Utopia, because what happened was that this wonderful woman called Rosie Osborne has got this sort of... it's like a residency in St Ives, and she got in touch with me and she's like, oh, do you want to just stay in my flat for a week and write some music or do whatever you want? And like, all I need is to like take a photo of you, and then like that's all I need. So I've got I've got a sort of a document that you were there. Wow. And I was just like, all right, okay. And I'd written both Tresor. I'd written Tresor and St Ives. So I was going back to the place that I'd written a record in. And that was really good because going back, I was like, I can't write Tresor again. Like, this, it's just not possible because I've done that now. I've kind of got to look at this from a different point of view. And the first song that I wrote was St Ives New School, which is Rosie's residency. And then I was just thought, oh yeah, I'm sort of looking at St Ives from a different perspective here, and like just going, what happens if you write in English? And because her flat's very sort of mid-century, modern, really, really, really inspiring, and then you're there and Barbara Hepworth's there and, Alfred Wallace is there and then Sven Berlin is there. Everyone's there, St Ives, and I was like, oh my God, I feel like I'm in the 60s here. Like, it's really exciting. Peter Lanyon. And then that's got me thinking. I thought, oh, that's quite an interesting concept, just write about cities. So I always liked, Sufjan Stevens. Like, he started, didn't he, with Illinois, and then And I was thinking about that as well, because I thought, I love that idea. Like, you're just writing about different places. I loved that, because he didn't really follow it through, did he? But I loved the concept of that. I was like, oh, that's a really, like, to sort of try and capture the spirit and like the vibe of a place. Because I was just thought, oh yeah, I could do that. And I'm feeling a little bit wings of desire, you know, like there's angels just flying through. Like, that was my concept, really. I was like, I'm just going to fly through all these cities that I've lived in like a ghost, and like, I'm not there. And then that sort of got me thinking conceptually about it. And then I was like, oh yeah, you know, I'll write about Las Vegas, because I hadn't written about Las Vegas, you know? And it's sort of, it's been really fantastic to claim places. I hadn't written about Brighton. I hadn't written about London. And London is really multi-layered for me. Like, my family are from East London on my mum's side. And then I've lived there like many times, you know, like at different points in my life. And I've had different London experiences, all sort of amalgamation of it all. And then thinking about all the Welsh people that came to London, and thinking about William Blake and all of that stuff. So everything's like the spirit of place. And it also is kind of like rebelling against this, like, what I find really dull, a very middle class view of, like, you know, landscape and language and all of this nonsense that I just don't think is very, you know, it's not actually about the people that live in those landscapes. And like, Cornwall has it and Wales has it a lot, you know, where people are like, oh, there's such a beautiful view, shame about the people, kind of thing, you know. And so I was sort of rebelling against that, because I just thought, I'm not pastoral. Like, I grew up in South Cardiff in a really multicultural area, really working class area that I'm really proud of being from. Like, I'm not this, like, you know, swatty, like, you know, looking at the landscape, you know, whatever. Like, I've lived in cities. I've been working since I was 16. Like, it's just like, you know, I'm more of a troubadour, and then just sort of, so that was the drive, you know. It was like going, and I think it's always great as the more you go on, you sort of just exploring different aspects of the life that you've had, and then just wanting to capture an atmosphere of the place, because I think these songs are still quite sort of dreamlike in a way, and ghostly, but wanting to sort of capture, yeah, just the atmosphere of cities and celebrating cities, and like the sort of the mess that we make, instead of going, you know, like, let's make everything nice. Like, cities are really harsh. I mean, the countryside is really harsh environment, but cities are as well. And I think, you know, you sort of, you know, all these cities I've lived in, and I may as well never have been there. Like, I've made no impact on that place. Do you know what I mean? I've just kind of floated through, and that feeling of how insignificant you are. It was just like ideas like that, basically.
Can you tell us more about the track Dancing on Volcanoes? I understand it was inspired by Jarvis Cocker.
Yeah, so that was, I always tell this story, and it's just to have a little dig, really. So it was, I was doing this Rough Trade Books. Oh, it was a fantastic event. They were having a 5th birthday party, and Jarvis Cocker did his Good Pop, Bad Pop skit. Brilliant book. So he was just DJing and then like shouting into the mic, and the front of house engineer, I was talking to him after, I was like, I couldn't understand the word he was saying. It's like, yeah, but I just love his voice so much, I just wanted to turn it up. And I was just like, it kind of worked, because you couldn't make out a word he was saying. It was just really distorted and really like drenched in reverb. And then he went on the middle of the dance floor, and you know, there's dry ice, and he was dancing all alone. And it was I was just like, oh my gosh, this is amazing, because it was just, I'm in a working man's club in Sheffield somewhere. That's where I'm at here now. It's like, it's the 80s. Everyone's gone home. The DJ's just loving life, all alone. He's had too many beers. It was just really amazing, cinematic, you know, art piece, basically. And then it was just, yeah, it sort of made me thinking. And I'd been thinking about this concept of dancing on volcanoes. And so he inspired it. And just thinking about like, oh, you know, because I think Jarvis epitomizes that arty, everyone gets together. There's an imperfection to it, but we're sort of living. Like there's something very life affirming about his music and his everything that he does. But there's very tangible, because obviously the way that, you know, the sort of kitchen sinkness of it, basically. So that triggered it then. And then I sort of did a Google search. I thought, has anyone written this song? And I think Genesis have done a song called like Dancing with a Volcano or Dancing or something. But also the last finance minister of the Weimar Republic, in his final speech, was, you know, we are heading towards a disaster and dancing on the side of a volcano. And I love the Weimar Republic. And I hope that whole German era is just like, you know, Brecht and all of that stuff I love. So it was all sort of serendipitous that it also, and it was just that feeling as well of like wanting to write a song about the dance floor again, because it's the thing, you know, it's that as well, like my dancing's so important to me, and it's sort of trying to explore that, and I hadn't danced for a long time, so it was sort of writing a song for that. And we'd gone to, there's a brilliant, in Grangetown, in the area, in Cardiff, there's a fantastic Nigerian restaurant called La Mandela, and the band and I had an amazing night there until like 5 a.m. So that was fed into and it's a little bit like, you know, like a Dalston bar. It's like that kind of vibe. I was like, oh my God, I feel like I'm back in London, and this is like definitely where I'd be. You know, it was that random night and you're just dancing to Nigerian beats. It was amazing. And they were all looking at us like, what are you doing here? But it was brilliant. It was really good.
Well, speaking of dancing, before your career in the Pipettes, you were in Michael Flatley's Lord of the Dance. What was that period of your life like? I understand that elements of that fed into Utopia.
Yeah, it did, because I got a job when I was 16, which was really lucky because I was not in a good place. You know, I was not hanging out with the right people. My parents were divorced and not around. It was just like extreme 16-year-old behaviour, really, no one looking after me. But I always danced because my dad spoke Irish, had Irish friends. We sort of fell in with Irish community, expat community in diaspora in Cardiff and Splot, which is an area where a lot of Irish live. And then got a job, did a lot of touring around Europe, Germany and Australia, and then got the lead part, got sent to Las Vegas. When was it? 98, I think. I think it was 98. And then, yeah, I mean, it's just really surreal, actually, more than it was really surreal to go from like poverty, really, to being paid like way more than anyone I knew at the time. And then, but also knowing how fleeting it was. I was always conscious of that. I was like, I'm not in control of this. Like, I've got a boss, and I'm not, I'm creatively not control of it, no control over it. And when I lived in Las Vegas, I got piano, and I started thinking about music, and I was just like, because I always loved, music's a big part of my life anyway, but coming from Wales, and there was a sort of, Cardiff's a really sort of R&B, like 90s R&B kind of city. It's like a slow jam city, I think, you know. Yeah. You know, like how it's always like striking how like soul music from the South in America sounds like Wigan. Like, it's just, I'm always like, I wish I could work, because it just sounds like rain and slate tiles, and like, how does that happen? I just don't know. But in that vein, I think that Cardiff is like slow jams, like Jodeci and Aaliyah and all of those, like R. Kelly for all his sins. But it's like, it's that kind of city, and particularly like my generation, it's definitely a slow jam city. In my like, when I think of Cardiff, I just think of slow jams. But it's so there was all this music around, and like Tupac and like hip hop and like stuff. There was all this music around, so it was music from somewhere else. It wasn't music from where I was from. So, and music in my life was always like playing piano, Irish Irish folk tunes that I would dance to, that I'd get really excited about. My mum's street choir, which was actually a lot of that's like Woody Guthrie, Joan Baez stuff, and like Billy Bragg, whatever, an international socialist, because it's a socialist street choir. So nothing was to do with like being a pop star or like being an sort of object within the music industry that you buy a record. Like nothing was about buying records almost. It was like either like in your sort of nappy nights in a nightclub or whatever, or when you went to the fair and like you fancied boys or whatever, or it was like traditional Irish dancing tunes that an accordion player would play on a Sunday when you went and did a competition. I remember there's an amazing show that was done by a Welsh theatre company called Brithgof that they did with Test Department. Do you know the band Test Department?
Yeah.
They did this, and like that would be like my first show, and I think this is the musical experience that's had the biggest impact on me. Is that my dad was really good at this. Like he would take me to see concerts and shows, and generally they'd be things like the Chieftains. Like that's where I saw Jean Butler dance, and I was like, I want to be like her. I'm going to do that job. And then like quite random theatre stuff, which was all quite radical in the 80s. And then so Brithgof and Test Department did this sort of play with music by Test Department about the Gododdin, which is the oldest poem written in Britain in Welsh. And it's about a battle that the Welsh went and fought up in the northeast of what is now the northeast of England, Catterick, and they just all get murdered. And so my dad took me, and he was in this old factory, Ford factory, and it was just like really damp, really cold, lots of flashing lights, naked bodies, using like the oil drums, and it was just awesome. And then everyone dies at the end. I'll never forget it. And I would have been about 7.
Wow.
It was amazing. So this sort of like massive industrial goth death, naked bodies, but not in a sexual way. And it was just like, oh my God, this is like, and just oil and water and like metal. It was just unbelievable. You can find the video online, but like that. So I'm really interested in that sort of Brythonic expression. It's there, and it's the goth in me. Like I just love it. But yeah, so everything was about so experiences and stuff. So, but then when I got to Las Vegas, and then I was just like, fantastic guy, Rhys Moyn. I don't know if you know him. He's a bit of a legend in Wales. He put out Griff Rhys' first band when he was a drummer. That's Bluggy. He's been really integral with his group Antrefn, and toured a lot of Europe. He really paved the way for like furries and everyone else that came after. And he just sent me a message going, "Oh, do you want to do a pop project?" And I was like, "Well, why not? Well, what is that?" And I think it was him and his wife wanted to come over to Vegas. It was just an excuse, but I was like, "Yeah, okay, fine. This is really, So I took it really seriously. And then I just started putting music out in Welsh, and doing sort of electronic music and stuff. And that was the sort of journey. So it's been a slightly less conventional one, and quite abstract.
You talked about your parents a couple of times. I understand your dad was a Cornish poet and linguist, and your mum was a translator, which obviously feeds into your music a lot. But in terms of the music that you were listening to growing up, it sounds like it was very uncommercial. It's
crazy because you could do that in the 80s. Like you could do that. Like my mum wouldn't let us watch English television. Like there was S4C, which came in 1981, was like when Channel 4 was launched, we had S4C. And there would be like, I think it was like a couple of hours of kids' TV until 5 o'clock on S4C, which we were obviously allowed to watch. And then after that was the Munsters, and she would switch the sound off. And out of protest, my sister and I would just sit there and watch the Munsters. And it was so many years until I actually heard what the Munsters sounded like, because I would just like watch it, love it. Again, it's like the gothness, it's like the Munsters, but no sound. So we just watch it like it was a silent movie. And I was just like, she could do that. And like, there'd be no English music in the house or anything like that. And so everything was like far away, because of the way that I was raised in a sort of this weird, like cult-like environment where you reject the outside world.
So I'm guessing going to Las Vegas was quite a shock for your mother.
Exactly. I was like so chuffed about it because I thought all that hard work and I get employed by an American and sent
The
to Las
deepest
Vegas.
rebellion.
Exactly. But it's that thing again, I think, where, again, to come back to who we are as our creative selves, everything has an impact, you know? Like, that was a thing for me. I just thought, gosh, you know, if I hadn't gone to Las Vegas, my relationship to North America would be very different. And I think that the fact that I did, for some reason, the world, you know, fate decided, the universe decided that was what my journey was going to be. There was lessons to be learned. And that's why it was so great to go back, and it was so great to explore it. Because I was just like, because what I loved about it when I went back older, like Claire and I stayed, that made the videos with me and everything. We stayed downtown. I don't know if you've ever been to Vegas, but downtown's it's like a very sort of old Vegas. It's great. You know, like we stayed in this hotel run by this family, and, you know, it was really old school Vegas. And it was going back and realizing that my empathy to Las Vegas came from the fact that I worked there, and it's a working class town. And actually, what's fascinating about Vegas is that it's like an American way of like giving. It's like Butlins. Do you know what I mean? It's like, that's the vibe of Vegas. And it is different now because it's trying to be like all swish and stuff. But actually, what Vegas's point was like escapism for the average American that didn't have a huge amount of budget, but kind of, you know, it's like, it's so escapist. And like, there's something I really appreciated about like being a town full of people in the service industry, and just reconnecting with that again. And like, you know, Americans think Las Vegas is horrible. Like, most Americans don't like Las Vegas. And for me, it sort of epitomized North America for me. You know, it's gambling, it's escapism, it's not taking responsibility, but also there's this sort of joyfulness in the sort of glittering, like, you know, temporary joy in it that I think is so fleeting. And I love the beauty of the, like, how it's falling apart, really. So this is of almost like a Byron-esque, like, love of, like, disintegration of a place rather than it being, like, great, you know?
So in that household in South Wales, what were you and your sister listening to? What could you get your hands on?
Yeah. it's like living in the DDR or something. I'm trying to think now. My mum's best friend's daughter loved Madonna, and I really loved the Immaculate Collection. I thought that was fantastic. It was so few and far between what we were able to get. And then as I got into my teens, I really loved, I think Acid House happened at the end of me being in primary school. And I remember that, you know, I remember people, you know, like people's older siblings, like showing them a smiley face. And it was just like, oh, what's this smiley face, you know? And I really loved all of that early dance music that came through that was really minimal. So I remember really liking that kind of stuff as a teenager. And then just a lot of R&B, you know. I just loved Aaliyah. I loved, like I said, Jodeci. I loved Stevie Wonder. I loved, like, it was just lots of stuff. And I loved Tupac. I really loved Tupac. I was just like, this is my voice. I really understand what you're saying. Which obviously I didn't, but I really did love Tupac. Yeah, so it was a lot of that. And then there's a lot of happy hardcore stuff. You remember people used to bring those cassettes in to raves I never went to. You know, I didn't go to rave. I didn't go clubbing until I went to North America, really. So there was electronic. Yeah, it was sort of at TLC, do you know? So it wasn't indie music. And I do remember feeling, and my husband and I talk about this a lot because we make music together. And he loves Blur, he loved Beck, he loves, you know, Supergrass, like all of those bands that were doing fab. I mean, the only Britpop band that I liked was Pulp. I didn't like anyone else. But I think it was sonically. So it was partly because in school, everyone that was into like indie bands was suburban, and I didn't come from suburbia. So I was living in Cardiff It wasn't the docks, really. It was next to the docks. So I was in a really, like, far more multicultural area where people listen to hip hop and dance music. So it wasn't R&B or whatever. It was, I couldn't relate to the suburbanness of Blur, for example. I was just like, this is leafy and like having a nice time in your garage. Like I just couldn't relate to it, like that freedom, really. And also sonically, even though now obviously sonically it's really interesting to me and fascinating. So yeah, I was definitely not a Britpop kid at all. In fact, I rejected it. I was just like, oh. And it was only later that I got into, but I just didn't have the grounding in it either. Do you know what I mean? I wasn't playing the Beatles or the Rolling Stones or Bowie or anything at home. So none of it made sense to me. It was just all quite noisy and suburban. So I was just like, I mean, I'm not interested in suburbia. Suburbia has created incredible music because of the boredom, because you live in, you know, there's a stability to suburbia that creates boredom, and especially, you know, pre-internet, you've got to do something with yourself because you're just so boring and it's unstable, and like your parents have nice jobs and you just like food on the, you know, like my parents weren't even there. Like I raised myself, so I was just like in survival mode, and someone just like messing around on a guitar, it just didn't make any sense to me at all. I was just like, well, I'm really happy for you, but like literally it says nothing to be about what my life's like. So it's the sort of music, and I think obviously because I was a dancer and movement, and again being in the area that I was from, things like Aaliyah and Tupac and people like that were going to just have more impact on me because that's who I was living around. So it sort of made more sense.
You sort of mentioned the word survival quite a few times. Do you feel? Yeah.
Now that we're in this therapy session.
I did sort of wonder, you know, is that how you look at your career at times? It does seem to be a bit of a thread along of kind of like, you know, as we were talking about, you know, being in or out of the music industry.
I mean, life is about survival, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm quite a harsh. I've been listening a lot to Bob Dylan recently, and I'm just like, I totally get it. Like I'm a realist. I'm a romantic, but I'm a realist. And I think that I've always been drawn to art that expresses that sense of survival and that like it could go either way-ness. And yeah, so I think it's just the way that I view the world. You know, it's like there's, you know, you've got to be prepared for a disaster around the corner. That's just how it is, you know. And I think that I don't know. There's a harshness to it, but I think it's because I've got quite a harsh mother, so it's like, you know, think you don't have the sort of cuddly niceness of like, oh, that's nice, you know, don't have any of that. And I actually, you know, having children, I really constantly trying to create comfort. Like I adore like trying to make a home. Like it's really important to me because I don't feel like I really had one, which I think is what I've thought a lot about that, thinking about therapy. The Cornish language, it's a comforter. It's a comfort to me. Like that's why I use it, because it makes me feel safe. Perhaps at points where I haven't, because like I lived in a dingy flat, you know, it was like leaking, like it was just damp and horrendous. And so I think that that's where like music has come from. It's like the comforter. Like, but actually it's the same for my husband as well, because Reese is like that as well. Like, but he's sought it in his like isolation, whereas I've sought it in like trying to cut the chaos out. So you just go to the music. But I think that's what music's for, you know? Yeah. That's what music's for all of us, whether we make it or listen to it, is a stabilizer and a comforter for all of us. And I think that whoever we are gets expressed in that comfort. So it's not necessarily that you need to create comfort as a sound, but it's just that that's where you seek it to sort of stabilize yourself.
And it feels like your label, Heavenly, are very supportive with their artists. I mean, the stuff with Kneecap that's happened, they've been tremendously supportive. How important is that as an artist, it feels like, having a label that's really got your back?
Oh, I think so. I think the thing about Heavenly and Jeff and Danny and Daisy and Catherine, everyone, Georgia, everyone that's there, and Andrew, they're one, they're really about community, I think. Jeff's gets excited by that. Like that's his, that's what he gets excited about. It's like, what's the community around this this thing, whatever, whether it be a band or an artist or something. They've created their own community as well. Heavenly is a community. So it's finding like-minded people, I think. And again, as you get older, you're sort of, you know yourself better. And so you tend to come across the people that you generally, that you connect with and you're on the same page as. And also it's that thing of, again, to come back to the survival thing, and it's about how much you do yourself. Like, Rhys and I put that record out for, like, our first record, we put it out on Rhys's label with Gadmon Pesky Records. So, like, we're still a pretty DIY band. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's the relationship is to facilitate, our records being shared with the world, and also to feel part of the community as well. So I think it's a really well-balanced relationship in that sense that, because I think when you're younger, perhaps you're expecting miracles from human beings. And like, I think as you get older, you're sort of more pragmatic about the functionality and like the actual process of putting a record out and all of that stuff, And again, it comes back to a generational thing. Had I been 10 years older, I probably would be expecting more people to do more stuff for me. But being the generation that I am, you just do everything. You behave like an adult, basically, like everyone else does in every other industry. But I think, in the past, perhaps the music industry has treated their artists as children, which hasn't been good for the artist because the artist doesn't know what's going on.
Have you started working on your next album yet?
We've been recording and we've got some songs that I feel are talking to the rest of Utopia. And then there's more, like loads actually, like a huge amount, which is good. We're going to go on tour again next year because I loved it so much, and we're really good at putting a tour, like getting we tour manage, so we're like get the best hotel for the cheapest price, and like what's fab is like everyone in the band gets on, no one's got an alcohol problem, so it's not hard, because like you can make like touring life much harder for yourself, if you've got your own issues. But that's not the environment. So it's just a really nice little trip. So it'd be nice to have some new songs to play.
You said the songs were talking to each other.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. I think what's happened this year is like I've embraced perhaps a part of me that I'd forgotten about, or that I'd sort of was like set aside a little bit. And it was really important with this record to sort of just acknowledge all of that. In a sort of Carl Jung sense, just like all the people that you've been, like all of that dress rehearsal that you did, like it's all part of the same thing to move forward. And I think that this year's been a little bit of a like, oh gosh, yeah. And also having children, as a woman, it's just, it literally takes a while to get back to yourself, and you kind of go, oh my God, yeah, I remember me. So you have a lot of that going on, and that affects the art that you make as well. I'm finding that balance between, I'm like a massive swat, but I'm also completely debauched, and it's just trying to find the balance between the two that's healthy, where in terms of like where you find your freedom and also being open to more life,
So is the next album, have you thought about which language it's going to be in, or are you just not quite there yet?
I've thought a lot about the feeling, which is what I do. I think what I tend to do with making records, I think of the atmosphere. And what I'm really excited about is thinking about methodology as well. Because Utopia was all about getting back to the piano and getting back to the instrument. And actually so much of this year has been about people in a room together, what that means. And I think I have I'm distanced. It's just working out my relationship with electronic music, which has always been there, and like where it fits in, that it doesn't become distant. I'm more interested in immediacy and directness. And I'm a very direct person, which is kind of weird that I sort of feel like sometimes it comes out as quite abstract, but I'm really direct. So yeah, it's just growing, I guess. We'll see. I've got some ideas, and I feel like, and methodology that I'm exploring. So we'll see.
And you're playing some shows with the Super Free Animals as well.
Yeah, which would be amazing.
How did that come about? Are they old friends?
Well, actually, our studio is in the same warehouse as Kian, who plays keys. And I've toured with Griff. I mean, everyone in Cardiff, it's a community of people. What's quite nice about Cardiff is that we all sort of hide in our caves a bit, which is lovely because no one gets on each other's nerves. It's not like some city, like Brighton, oh my God. But like some places I feel like it's just dramas constantly with artists. And then I feel like that's not the case for Cardiff, or maybe I'm just out of the loop. But I just feel, maybe is that, like, just a bit boring. But yeah, it just feels like everyone gives each other space, I think there's a real sort of nice respect that everyone has for each other and sort of respect in space as well. And rather than it's not a sort of juvenile scene, let's say.
And I always ask our guests if they can recommend an album from the last 12 months.
Oh, nice. New or old?
Actually, either. It could be either.
Okay. I really loved that Natalie Bergman record, I mean, I immediately liked it just because the style of it and that sort of 60s thing and really good sort of soul songs. I really, really loved that album. And the more I listened to it, the more I loved the record. It's just really, really good songwriting. And it was just nice to hear something. I just love songs. Like, I really love a good song. And that era, I will always come back to it. And then the other record that I really loved this year was Blood on the Tracks. Which obviously, oh, hello, but I think there's just, I mean, I love that. That is my favourite Dylan record, and it's astonishing, really, in terms of songwriting and storytelling. I mean, you don't need me to go on about Bob Dylan, do you? Like, who needs me as an extra person to go on about Bob Dylan? But it's really, it's just the maturity of it, I think, and it's the. I'm not going to, I'm not going to go on about Bob Dylan. No one needs to hear me go on about Bob Dylan. But that has been my record this year as well.
Gwenno, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Well, thanks for having me. Great therapy session. Thank you.
Thanks to Gwenno for joining us on the show today. She's announced several gigs and festival dates for this summer, so be sure to check them out, as well as her latest album, Utopia. Coming up at Scared to Dance, we have our first club night at the legendary George Tavern this Saturday. There are a few tickets remaining on Dice. I'll be back next week with my guest. The final episode of the series is the comedian and broadcaster Ellis James. We'll be digging into his record collection and discussing his life from playing in bands to becoming a stand-up. This podcast was produced at Third Floor Recording.